To be honest, I have the most consistent upload schedule on YouTube. Victoria 3 is a game that I've played a lot of, and I have an opinion on this game that I would like to share with you guys in this video. And I'll try not to let that opinion be skewed too much by the obscenely long load time that is associated with this game. I mean, I'm about 4 minutes into the recording and the game has not launched yet. If you're new here, I'm a Victoria 2 fan, mostly. I have over 1,000 hours in that game. And I've recently been enjoying Victoria 3 as well. So we're going to break this review up into 6 categories. We're going to discuss the economy, and then we'll discuss the military. We're going to discuss diplomacy, we will discuss research, we will discuss population, and then we will discuss how I actually feel when I play this game. So first up is the economy. Although it does give me great joy to see this little tiny GDP bar increase, for me the economy is kind of a mixed bag. Sure, I really do like the application of supply and demand to every single good within the game in a way that you can actually see as the player, as it does add depth to the game because you get to control the price of each individual good in your society. I like the way that there are a variety of consumer goods like furniture and also just some of the more basic ones like paper and food that you have that can improve the quality of life of your citizens if you produce them in sufficient quantities. I like striking a balance between making your goods cheap enough for your pops to purchase and also expensive enough that your factories are profitable. So as far as I'm concerned, I very much enjoy the domestic side of building an industry. It doesn't make a lot of sense that the government is the only entity that can build stuff within your nation, but I understand why it's done this way, because in Victoria 2, if you were on any sort of market economy, you were immediately crushed by the fact that your capitalists would build stupid factories that would never be profitable. A great addition to the game, in my opinion, is the investment pool, because it kind of does represent those capitalists, but it allows you to use the capitalist money to make investments in what you would like to make investments in, rather than just random stuff that the game selects. Would it be more realistic if the capitalists made their own investments? Yes, it would. And would it make it more of an important thing to be switching over to something like a command economy? Yes, I think it would. But fundamentally, I don't really have a problem with that feature. One thing that is very, very unfortunate to me is the new market mechanics. I have no interest in managing the imports and exports of every single good produced within a massive economy like America. And it's tedious, and if you're playing this game for hours and hours, you're playing in 1 or 2 sittings from 1836 to 1936, doing all those trades manually gets incredibly boring. I find railroads in this game are difficult to manage because you have to strike a balance between not investing too much that they're unprofitable, but also investing enough that you get your infrastructure levels to a healthy place. That is a cool mechanic, I just feel like it's a little tedious as well. There's a little bit more I'd like to talk about pertaining to the economy, but it's actually more diplomacy, so we'll talk about it later. So overall, I'd say the Victoria 3 economy is probably my favorite part of this game, and it definitely is fun, albeit a little tedious. Next up, we have the military, and although the diplomatic plays are technically not a military action, they're a diplomatic action, I will lump them in here. I think the way war goals are added is pretty good. I wish that you could add war goals during a war. That's just dumb. I don't know why it's like that. If the war goes on for longer, it's only natural that a country would need to take more to justify the war, so you should be able to add war goals progressively as the war goes on. As far as the actual military goes, I think that there are some merits to not being able to control your own military because it makes it a lot harder to cheese the game, but at the same time, I do miss having control over my own military. One place I feel like the militaries are too weak is in any kind of naval invasion scenario. I know that there weren't a lot of naval invasions during this period simply due to the fact that the boats weren't that good. As in, they didn't have landing craft like they did in World War II. But I feel like it severely limits the ability of the colonial powers to play the game. To me, the main problem with military in Victoria 3 is that it feels like devoid of life. It doesn't feel like you're playing the military. It's like you set something up and then some other player, your co-op, essentially comes in and does the work for you. And it's a little bit boring, I would say, and not my favorite part of this game. I definitely prefer the military in Victoria 2. Like, I just took out Haiti, but I barely touched my mouse at all. I'm sure this is probably how it feels to be the president of the United States or any other country when they wage a war, but it's just not good gameplay. So now as we move into the diplomacy category, we'll talk about infamy. I feel like infamy in this game is nowhere near as big of a deal as it should be. You can take so much territory before your infamy actually has any diplomatic consequences that it feels like you could just straight up play something like Prussia, conquer all of Europe, form an EU-like thing without anybody breaking a sweat. I think I'm 100 hours into this game or something, and I haven't had a single war that I lost where somebody decided that I had too much infamy. In contrast to how important infamy was in Victoria 2, where if you went over your infamy for 1 minute, you were suddenly surrounded by every single great power invading you at rapid speed, it feels different. It honestly makes me feel like the military in this game is more similar to the Hoi 4 military than anything else. And that brings us into our next topic of diplomacy, which I'll describe as the way that countries interact with each other. There's some things that are good, like the fact that you can just click begin improving relations with a nation, and then it automatically improves relations with them. You don't have to keep going back. Every time you get diplomatic points, improve relations. Much better. I also like that you can bankroll nations, which just shows that the nations that have a strong economy in this game also succeed diplomatically, which is kind of what happens in real life. And I like all the different diplomatic plays you have to do different things, like make Dominion, make Puppet, regime change, open market, all great, honestly. I like how your trade actions, although tedious, do have an effect on which countries like you and which countries do not, which kind of makes it so your economic policy has to be allied with your political policy. Though the way economic imperialism is represented within this game is not my favorite. Although I've played this game for about 30 years, I haven't actually bothered to add anyone to my market. And I know it's good for my nation. I know it increases the amount of pops I can sell to and the amount of pops that produce goods that I might need. But overall, I don't get any pleasure in improving my relations with a nation for like several years and then bankrolling them and then becoming friends with them through trade and then finally changing them to our customs union. It's boring. And I'm honestly not quite at the point where I'm playing to do the perfect meta all the time. So sometimes I just don't bother with it. Though I can't say that the system in Victoria 2 was much better, so maybe this is better. I feel like I just have to get used to it. But overall, I'd say I like the increased options of diplomacy within this game. I suppose we should talk about politics before we move on from diplomacy. It's really very cool that we have these political figures that actually exist within this game. You're not so much this character like you are in CK3, but you're not just a nation like you are in Victoria 2. You can put a face to the name of whatever political party you are. As far as forming governments go, I like that a couple weeks ago they added the government legitimacy. It makes it more important to have a legitimate government. I like the way laws are passed. So if I want to pass, I don't know, what's good? How about charity hospitals? I like how you don't ever need 50% of the government to favor this reform, because that takes a long time, and sometimes you really want to pass reforms and you're just unable to do it under that system. So I like how there's a success chance. You can do certain events, you can pay money to increase that success chance. I'd say that the government is really good in this game. I like how it's not just a pie chart. There's faces. There's different political parties that shift in allegiance and which political party they're allied to over the period of the game. I like how you can sacrifice your bureaucracy to do more things, and then I like how the bureaucracy is tied to the amount of money you make. You want more bureaucracy, okay, you build more government administrations. Overall, I'd say that the diplomacy and the politics is probably my favorite part of this game, although I think I said that about the economy too. Next up, we have technology. I'm thinking that the technology tree is a little bit lackluster. The previous Victoria 2 technology tree had its flaws for sure, but it also had kind of like things that were unlocked over time. This is very much reminiscent of a national focus tree in Hoi 4. And although I feel like it's very logical, the direction in which it moves, if you want to do farming, okay, you can do it. Well, at the same time, you could also pick something else to research. I just feel like everything is pretty cut and dry, and it doesn't take very long to learn the research tree, which honestly could be a good or bad thing depending on how you look at it. Judging by the amount of depth in other parts of the game, like the economy, I do think that it's fine that the research tree is a little bit less than what it potentially could be. Hey, would you look at that? We now have charity hospitals. Back to the research tree, I also think it's interesting that random texts sometimes get researched by, I guess, just the pops within your nation. Makes it harder to find a meta, and it makes it so your game doesn't go the exact same every single time you play. Moving on to the pops. I feel like the pops in this game are a little bit more hidden than they were within the last game. They exist, sure, and there's a ton of them, and they're very detailed. I just stole that word from the detailed list box. I like how clearly you can see the transition of people from peasants to laborers as the game goes on. But I think my favorite part of the game overall when it comes to pops is that you can see the migrations. Like, Pennsylvania is where I invested at the beginning, so the pops went up at the beginning. But now there's better jobs elsewhere, like in California, which I've been developing. So the people moved to California. There's a lot of movement within your own nation, as well as immigration. I like how pops don't only immigrate to nations in the New World. They also immigrate to other nations, like if France was doing really well, which I have a video about that coming out at some point, people will migrate to France, even though it's not in the New World, which is cool. Quality of life is certainly an interesting mechanic. I feel like it's not totally grounded in the game, as in sometimes it just does stuff that doesn't really coincide with what's happening within your own nation. I feel like quality of life fundamentally is based off of how much infrastructure you have, to be honest. Like, the infrastructure breaks, and it's the single most driving down force of quality of life. Can't really say that much about the pops, honestly, because you kind of play the whole game without really thinking about them. I mean, sure, they work in your factories, but like, really? Anyway, pops are in this game, that's for sure. So then there's actually how I feel when I play this game. And this is a category because when I first start this game, I'm feeling great. The economy's growing. You feel good because you see the line go up and you get a little bit of dopamine. And then you kind of get to this point in the mid-game, like where I started this video, where you just kind of like stall. Sure, things are going good for you. Your economy's huge. You can build whatever you want without going into debt because either you have so much money in the investment pool or your economy's just booming. But then you start to get tired of the micromanagement. You start to get tired of making sure that all your goods are within this balance of being plentiful enough that everybody has them, but also not plentiful enough that they cost money and your factories make money. You get tired of looking at the screen, quite frankly. And then there's some other things that come in and make you feel sad, like the textile mills and stuff always seem to run out of dye every single time I play. And look, I'm buying all the dye on the market. I'll even buy from the Austro-Hungarians, I guess. But still, even after all that, there is still 933 less dye than there needs to be in the American market. And I know what you're saying, just go sphere some people. I don't want to. I don't. I want to be able to produce goods within my nation. And if I can't produce them within my nation, I want to be able to buy them. But I can't buy them, so it'll stall the entire economy indefinitely because I can't get enough dye, and it's infuriating. The same thing happens with oil. Any nation that can't produce oil, France, basically anybody in Europe, there's very few RGOs in Europe, except for Britain, who has like Saudi Arabia and stuff. Any of those nations, it's just infuriating to play after your economy reaches a certain size because you just can't get the goods you need to consume to continue playing the game effectively. And that just really takes the wind out of your sails. It makes you feel bad. And your quality of life decreases for no reason. And you try and figure it out, but you can't figure it out. Because for all intents and purposes, nothing should have changed, except it's probably the coal price at this point. So you say, oh, okay, it's the coal price that's decreasing my quality of life. And also maybe the food price. And also maybe the liquor price. You're like, okay, I'll build some of that. And you do it. And you're fine with it. It's just, you do it every single year for the entire game. And there's never really a break from microing. It's kind of just the game. And that's why I'd say that although this game is really well thought out, it kind of lacks some things within the gameplay. I really do enjoy this game. I think it honestly has great potential to be one of the best Paradox games of all the Paradox games. And I'm willing to get over some of the things, or at least try and continue playing and learn things about like the new military. I can do that. Making the new diplomatic plays, the custom unions, I'm sure I can learn how to do that too. But if there's just a point in the game that I hit every single time I play the game where I stop enjoying myself because of the level of micro that is required to play the game, then I think that that's kind of unfortunate. I think that that could be solved, to be honest. If there were smart capitalists that were able to show up and, like, right now, if they were able to look at something like this, something like the economy details, they were able to see, okay, here is some lead that we need to produce, and then they build some lead mines across your country. If something like that was able to occur, it would kind of take some pressure off the player and allow them to have a little bit more fun of a time while playing. And I'm not saying that the player should have zero control over their own economy, then it wouldn't be a game. But I think that there are some things that get a little bit out of hand if the player isn't microing, and maybe if there was some other factor that could be written off as capitalist that could help decrease that micro a little bit, the game would be fun not only for a short period of time, but for the entire length of the game, from 1836 to 1936. So overall, I would say that Victoria 3 in its current state is somewhere between a 6 and 7 out of 10, because I do like the game. I like the mechanics. The first couple minutes I load up the game, it's just, I feel great. It's an awesome game. I'm enjoying myself. But as the game drags on, I start to not feel that way anymore. But it's a Paradox game. A couple DLC will come out, and I'll open up my wallet and buy them. And then eventually it'll turn out probably as a good game. Or rather, a great game. Now I would say it's a good game. It just lacks the longevity of other Paradox games. Anyway, thank you all for sticking with me during this rant about Victoria 3. I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know in the comment section your opinions on Victoria 3, because I have my opinion. I don't know if it's quite popular because I haven't heard great things from other members of the community about the game, although I do think that it shows promise. Everybody who watched this video is the best. Thank you. Bye.